Russia-Ukraine News Ashot Yegiazaryan, a Russian software developer, is rumored to have fled the country to avoid legal repercussions. Ashot Yegiazaryan, a former Moscow property developer and Russian Duma deputy, is rumored to have fled the country after allegedly breaking his court promises in Los Angeles. Yegiazaryan had promised his former business partner, Vitaly Smagin, more than $150 million in a highly charged commercial dispute. An arbitration panel in 2014 awarded $84 million to Smagin after the two parties had a disagreement over a Moscow shopping center. That sum is now much higher due to interest. To avoid jail time, Yegiazaryan promised to pursue legal action in foreign courts to help Smagin collect the award. Yegiazaryan has claimed that opponents within Putin's government, with whom Smagin is said to have collaborated, are conducting a witch hunt against him. Yegiazaryan argued against the worldwide freeze of his assets in a federal court filing made in 2015, claiming that the promises he made in court had no legal effect and should be disregarded. Immediately following a civil contempt hearing, the most recent development in the case was Yegiazaryan signing a declaration explicitly renouncing his promises to the federal court. Even though this declaration was notarized by well-known Russian notary Daniel Lerman, the court has rejected it as invalid. Nicholas Kennedy, Smagin's attorney, claims the declaration constitutes perjury and criminal contempt, and he has asked for an arrest warrant to be issued for Yegiazaryan. After having a falling out with powerful oligarchs connected to Putin's regime in 2010, Yegiazaryan fled Russia and has since gained widespread attention around the world. His case has been cited as an example of the Russian government's use of foreign courts to advance its interests in two separate reports by expert groups. However, the notarized document may be used to challenge the promises Yegiazaryan made to the federal court, and it is unclear how Smagin's legal team obtained it. Kennedy believes Yegiazaryan may have fled the country to avoid facing justice in the United States. Two related Moscow real estate projects are at the heart of the ongoing dispute between Yegiazaryan and Smagin. After backing a different presidential candidate in the mid-2000s, Yegiazaryan claims he and Putin had a political falling out, leading to his current legal woes. A banker-turned-real estate developer, Yegiazaryan was elected to the Duma in 1999 as a Putin ally. He was tapped to restore the Kremlin-area Hotel Moskva, but Russian billionaire and Putin ally Suleiman Karimov eventually took the reins. Yegiazaryan fled to the United States, specifically Beverly Hills, for fear for his life and the lives of his children. He eventually settled for nearly $200 million after winning a $250 million arbitration award against Karimov. Now that Smagin is suing Yegiazaryan, he needs access to these funds. As a result of Russia's blockade of Ukrainian grain supplies, global food prices have risen, prompting Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to announce measures to mitigate this effect while he is in New Delhi for the G20 Leaders Summit in India. Again, Russian President Vladimir Putin is skipping the G20 summit. By shutting himself off from criticism and the outside world in his presidential palace, he has effectively forced himself into diplomatic exile. The rest of the G20 are showing that they will show up and work together to pick up the pieces of Putin's destruction, he was quoted as saying by the UK High Commission. Starting with Putin's blockade and attacks on Ukrainian grain, there are dire repercussions for the entire world that must be addressed. Moscow's backpedaling on the deal in July and increased attacks on the infrastructure supporting Ukraine's grain industry dealt a blow to the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which had guaranteed the shipment of 32 million metric tons of grains. Food grains, such as wheat, are produced in large quantities in both Russia and Ukraine. Since then, the price of wheat, corn, and soybeans has skyrocketed around the world. Putin will once again skip the G20 Leaders Summit, this year scheduled for September 9 to 10 in New Delhi. According to a press release from the High Commission, Sunak will emphasize the importance of leaders attending the summit by addressing issues such as climate change and the stability of the global economy, which are affecting the world's most vulnerable people. We will use our intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance to monitor Russian activity in the Black Sea. call out Russia if we see warning signs that they are preparing attacks on civilian shipping or infrastructure in the Black Sea, and attribute attacks to prevent false flag claims that seek to deflect blame from Russia, said Sunak. To prevent Russia from attacking civilian grain transport ships, British aircraft are flying over the area as part of these surveillance operations. Russia has declared that all ships passing through Ukrainian Black Sea ports will be treated as military vessels since it withdrew from the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Based on this assessment, it has taken action by opening fire and boarding a cargo ship en route to one of Ukraine's Danube ports, which may be a violation of international humanitarian law. The United Kingdom will provide £3 million to the World Food Programme, WFP, to continue the work begun under Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky's Grain from Ukraine initiative, in addition to deploying military forces to deter Russian attacks. As a result of the rising global cost of food, this was launched in November of last year to facilitate the export of Ukrainian grain to countries in need. Grain from Ukraine has already helped deliver 170,000 metric tons of Ukrainian grain to countries like Somalia and Yemen in just the first 6 months of the program's existence. With the increase in UK funding announced on Friday, the WFP can send more grain to countries in need. The food supply from Ukraine to the World Food Programme has been crucial this year. Ukraine supplied WFP with 80% of its global wheat grain this year until July, when Russia withdrew from the Black Sea Grain Initiative. According to the High Commission, the United Kingdom plans to host a summit on global food security in November, bringing together government representatives from around the world, including those from vulnerable countries, along with international organizations, NGOs, researchers, and private sector companies to address the root causes of food insecurity and malnutrition. The meeting is supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Children's Investment Fund Foundation. Ukraine was the world's 5th largest wheat exporter, 4th largest corn exporter, and 3rd largest rapeseed exporter before Putin's full-scale invasion. Nearly 2/3 of Ukraine's grain exports go to developing countries, accounting for 41% of the country's total export revenue. Putin's brutal invasion of Ukraine 18 months ago has had a lasting impact on families all over the world. By manipulating global energy prices and uprooting over 11 million people, Russia has made life more challenging for people all over the world. As reported by The Washington Post in July of this year, Putin demonstrated his indifference to the human consequences of his actions yet again when he withdrew from the Black Sea Grain Initiative. This deal was made in July 2022 to ensure the safe passage of grain ships from Black Sea ports carrying Ukrainian produce. Millions of people around the world rely on grain exports from Ukraine, so this deal was a lifeline for them. In its first year, the agreement facilitated the delivery of 33 million metric tons of food to 45 different countries. Because of Putin's decision to abandon the initiative, global grain supplies have shrunk at a time when they are most needed by the world's poor. Russia has also been responsible for the destruction or damage to at least 26 civilian port facilities, warehouses, silos, and grain elevators since July. As a direct result of these attacks, Ukraine has lost a third of its export capacity and enough grain to feed over 1 million people for an entire year.